Okay, a very good evening to you and welcome to this inaugural webinar stroke podcast, The Green Zone, where opinions other than what has become a singular opinion on so many matters affecting our country here in Ireland and its culture, as well as matters of international and global matters. For example, with Donald Trump, no matter what good he does, the Irish mainstream media will continue to belittle him. This approach, the mainstream media know, has the desired effect of brainwashing the people, and those with opposing opinions to the narrative are pigeonholed as far right. In Trump's case, he is anything but perfect, and lots of things he does, even I don't like. But a little balance, which is what journalism should be about, would be very helpful. The same situation applies to the Middle East, where a one-sided portrayal is the order of the day. And again, if you provide a differing yet legitimate narrative, you're far right as well. For example, I was speaking to some people about the Abraham Accords in recent weeks, and they said, the what? And I said, the Abraham Accords, which were started by Donald Trump in his first term of office, where in 2020, countries such as the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, who were the first to join the Accords, followed then by Morocco and Sudan. These accords normalized diplomatic relations between Israel and these countries. More are to follow shortly in Trump's current tenure, which have the potential to transform the Middle East into a major economic powerhouse. We're here to hear the other side. We want to give the people the full picture that allows people to make informed opinions on whether their government speaks for them. My co-host this evening is Marco Alexander, live from Jerusalem. Marco is a licensed Israeli tour guide, born and raised in Dublin. Marco is the son of the late Irish actor Jerry Alexander and an Italian mother. He is a dual Irish-Israeli citizen, maintaining strong links to both countries. Marco is an established tour guide and simultaneous interpreter. He regularly works with groups and important personalities from around the world. Marco is fluent in English, Hebrew, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. His services were engaged by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Pope Francis' visit to Israel in 2014. Holding a BA in history and an MA in philosophy, Marco has a great passion for and knowledge of Israel, the Holy Land, and its surroundings. Andy Linton joins us from Alicante in Spain. Alan is originally from the UK, but is a very, very proud Irishman for the last 44 years. He's married also to a lovely Irish woman, too. Andy is a broadcast consultant, and as I say, he's living in Alicante, where he contributes on social media to the most important current matters of the day. Tom Turley is a dairy farmer from County Galway, and he has been a lobbyist for over 20 years on matters of agriculture. And he has other interests outside of farming that he is pursuing as well. And Tom has a huge interest and never afraid to say what he thinks in relation to politics and current affairs, whether it's here at home or abroad. First of all, you're all very welcome to this inaugural broadcast, and thank you for joining me on the program. Now, let's start off. This is all about Ireland and, about many of the things that are going on in Ireland. So let me just start with I believe that Ireland has this small man syndrome. Now, what I mean by that is that it had its partner, whether it didn't like it all the time, but it had its partner in the UK, another English-speaking country in the European Union, and of course Brexit ended that, and Ireland was left in some way isolated from the rest of Europe in geography mainly, but now seems to be jumping up and down to have itself heard in the world. Is Ireland? Does anyone agree? I'll start maybe with Andy. Andy, do you agree that Ireland somewhat suffers from small man syndrome, and especially as a result of Brexit?
I think it possibly does, but I also tend to think, and I don't mean this in any pejorative way, but I think Ireland has often had ideas above its station. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way. Ireland's a very small country. Its real and positive influence on the world, let's face it, I'm afraid to say, isn't very much. But So in that respect, now I'm not saying that Ireland's view on world affairs isn't important, because of course it is. All views are important. However, it did for a long time, as you say, live in the shadow of the UK. And I'm afraid to say it's also possibly debatable whether a lot of Ireland's policies and opinions shadowed that of the UK. I don't think that's necessarily was always a good thing, but I do think it happened. But the problem I find now, as you say, is that since Brexit, Ireland is isolated, not only geographically. It doesn't have that ally next door. It's, I think, you call it small man syndrome. I might call it small dog syndrome. You've got enough dogs. I know what small dog syndrome is. And a small dog is the one that barks the loudest, not necessarily for a good reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, how do you view that statement?
Well, about having a small man syndrome, it can be viewed like that, but at the same time, I suppose we have to remember that Ireland did have, and somewhat still does have, a say in world affairs. Because you take America, for instance, Ireland had awful connections, still does, to America. Would have the Irish, I suppose, 40 to 70 million people in America would claim Irish ancestry. So we'd have a big influence there over the time. We've had lots of, I suppose, links to the presidents, none more so than the last president, Joe Biden, and before that, Ronald Reagan. And, I know the current president doesn't necessarily say he's from Ireland yet, but it may suit him someday to say that. But in relation to the UK, people also forget that Ireland played a huge part in, I suppose, energizing UK and building the UK back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And while I think we might have lived in the UK's shadow, we were never afraid to voice our opinion to the UK or to anybody else. And so with the media at the moment, be it in Ireland or elsewhere, we might be seen to be making a lot of noise, if you like. But in some instances, we're reflecting, I suppose, the views of people. But the other views, if you like, the contrary view, is not being portrayed in our national media, if you like. The opinions of maybe the ordinary person on the street is not being portrayed as we would like it. It's changed a lot. It's changed a lot in my lifetime. It's probably changing rapidly at the moment. In the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, indeed, Ireland will be vastly different than it is today, and certainly vastly different than it was when I was a bit younger 20 years ago.
Tom, what do you put that change down to? The fact that Ireland is not, the media is not carrying what the ordinary person thinks, and you say it's accelerating. Why do you think that is?
It's hard to know. There's possibly a bit of government influence in the media. Naturally enough, we have our main media mogul, if you like, RT, which is state funded. So it's, he who pays the piper sometimes calls the tune. And if you have a different view on stuff, be it on the current government, be it on the current president in America, be it on anything, anywhere in the world, if you don't seem to be towing the line, as with the mainstream media, shall I say, in their narrative that's out there, you seem to be put into a box like, or you're either far left or you're far right, or you're racist, or So I think the ordinary person, and I count myself an ordinary person, I think our view is not being expressed. It's not being heard enough, and people have this attitude, unfortunately now. Sure, that's the way of the world, and what can I do about it? So we've lost a bit of that too. We've lost, you mentioned earlier, we've lost a bit of leadership maybe. But the media is a strong influence, and anybody that talks outside the circle, if you like, or outside the pale, can be pigeonholed into those various boxes I mentioned there.
Okay. Marco, you're obviously Irish. You're living in Israel. You're following Irish news because you're Irish. What's your take on what you know of what's happening in Ireland in relation to that whole thing of one-sided one-sided narratives.
Right, right. Well, I, to a certain extent, am playing catch up with news in Ireland because prior to the internet, I was quite disconnected for maybe a couple of decades. Now, what appears to be happening is that Ireland seems to be undergoing a very profound identity crisis, to my mind. The old linchpins of traditional Ireland have been cast aside. Christianity, which was the linchpin of Irish society, has been thrown out. The baby's been thrown out with the dirty water. Hence, I see a great sense of alienation in Ireland in this sense. I remember growing up as a boy, and obviously I'm not Christian. You know that I'm Jewish, but when I remember at the Ireland of my youth, I remember 80% of people going to church on a Sunday. Now, whether one liked it or not, or agreed with everything that the church said, it did provide a solid basis for identity in Ireland, and it was a great container of very solid values. This unfortunately has been thrown away with the dirty water, unfortunately. And Ireland seems to be playing catch up with a lot of countries in the European continent, and indeed Britain. The traditional values have been slowly eroded and dissolved. It has decided to follow in the footsteps of many European countries and opening its doors to waves of migrations which aren't necessarily the most compatible with Irish society. It's one thing having British people come to Ireland, kindred people. It's another thing to have people with a very different set of ideas. And the type of people it is admitting to Ireland are not the kind of people that are going to weave their way into the social fabric of Ireland. So I view this as a great problem, because Ireland has done in the past 10 years what mistakenly many European countries have done. They've admitted populations which are very difficult to integrate, and there's a lot of wear and tear on the social fabric. Now, this has been facilitated as well. Ireland has admitted to a great extent a progressive ideology which conditions academia, which is, of course, and has been a facilitator of this kind of immigration. So it is to a great extent. Unfortunately, it didn't learn the mistakes that the UK made, and the chickens are coming home to roost rather more rapidly in Ireland than they have done in the UK. In the UK, it has taken decades. There were warning signs which people chose not to heed. But now I think, and I've noticed recently, especially on the non-mainstream media, that there have been loads of protests, that people are finally beginning to realize the type of misdemeanors, I suppose, that have been practiced upon the Irish people by a self-appointed elite.
Okay, and I'm going to come back to that immigration shortly. But before I go, I want to ask Andy something now in a moment. But just before I do that, I have to do these. So I'm going to say, if people wish to subscribe to the show, they can press the subscribe button, and I probably hit the wrong one there, but let me just hide that one, and I'll hit this one here. This is the subscribe for more insights if you want to. Also, if you want to drop a comment in the chat box, you're feel free to do that. It's available there to do that. Or you can like and share the show with your friends or colleagues or whatever, those things, and we'll come back to them a little later on. Andy, I just want to go back to what Marco was saying there in relation to, and I'm not asking you about your religious affiliations or anything like that, but just to bring you back to what Marco was saying there in relation to the abandonment of Christianity in Ireland. Has that, in your opinion, a lot to do with the way Ireland currently is?
Yes, I believe so. I think that's a very good point from Marco. You see, if you're not a practicing devout Christian, be it Catholic or Protestant, it doesn't matter, because the society you live in is based on Christianity in the UK and in Ireland and in a lot of other European countries. That is the fabric that holds that society together. Now, if you then, shall we say, import or allow to be imported other, I'm afraid to say, frankly, incompatible societies, then that Christian-based society gets diluted. And it's a lot easier to dilute something small than it is something big. Ireland's got a population of what, 5 or 6 million now, is it? Something like that. The UK has a population of something between 60 and 70 million. They don't seem to know how many, but let's say it's something like that. So in percentage terms, it's a lot easier to dilute the Irish society, the Irish Christian society, than it is the British Christian society. And I'm afraid to say that dilution in Ireland is happening quite quickly. And it doesn't help that for some reason, and I asked myself this question many times and I've never been able to answer it. Maybe we can tonight. Why do Western governments, let's say the Irish government, why do they allow this to happen? It's not a difficult point. It's not difficult to understand. Surely it's obvious and surely it's not a good thing. But they don't seem to either want to do anything about it, and in some respects, you could suggest that they seem to want to encourage it. Now, I don't get that. I don't understand why any government would do that. Now, the trouble with Ireland is it doesn't really have a very democratic government anymore. Neither does the UK. Democracy is not really working anymore because when a political party is vying for election, they make all sorts of manifesto promises, and then when they get in power, they forget all that, and they do a load of other stuff, which means they're in a position of power doing things that no one's asked them to do, which is not democratic. But it's a question, as I say, why do governments let this happen?
And Tom, you're from probably part of the country where the Catholic religion was probably at its most over around the Galway in the west. With all the scandals in the church, did we throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it's now contributing to the lack of Christianity, or the waning of it is contributing to? Did we throw the baby out with the bathwater?
I suppose in some respects we did, but you know, we've always been in the shadow of something. If you like, Christianity in Ireland, mainly Catholicism, was our friend, if you like, up to a little over 100 years ago. Remember, we were conquered, if you like, or British ruled here for 700 years. And we only got we were a very young country. We only got our feet, if you like, our own vice. And the Catholic Church was very much part of that. So it's very much inherent in society. But certainly since, if you like, the scandals in the church, and there have been scandals in the church all over the world and in every church, not just the Catholic Church, there has been, if you like, a turn away from the church in general. But people are still very spiritual, and I know myself, our family, certainly our kids wouldn't have attended church, and even I today, as much as, if you like, my parents did, or I did when I was young, because you did what, I suppose, if you like, your family was doing, because whereas today with the internet and everything else, people and kids, they have opinions at 5 and 6 years of age. Some good, maybe even younger, because unfortunately now the children of today, there might be an iPad put in front of them instead of a rattler to peacify them, and they get their own views very, very quickly. And I suppose our curriculum, if you like, in our schools have changed. Society's changed, drastically. We have a lot of schools now. There was a Catholic ethos in most schools in Ireland, and Protestant on the other schools. There were the two main religions. Catholic was the majority. There was that ethos there, and they were both Christian ethoses. But now we have, and it's because society has changed, educate together schools. And you might have in a class, for example, in a modern educate together school, particularly in the urban areas, the cities in particular, of a class of 25 kids, you might have only one child from a Catholic school, from a Catholic home, shall I say. You might have another one from a Protestant, but the rest can be made up of many other religions. So society, is going to change and adapt because of that. In terms of Andy's point, I think it was Andy made the point about why the Irish government, if you like, is allowing all of this immigration. I suppose we are still part of the EU, and we're told as the ordinary people we have to take in a certain amount of people from other countries because of strife and war and all of that. And we're reminded all the time that the Irish, because of strife and war and trouble and poverty here, we had to leave our shores. Now, we are a nation of, people. No family in Ireland doesn't have somebody that's immigrated to some other part of the world, and he calls himself an Irishman, and I'm not doubting him, and Marco is Irish born. Both of these, if you like, are outside of Ireland and can have a good view looking back in, if you like, on the way things are, because sometimes when you're in the cocoon, you can't see out. But society has changed. I would think as a nation of people who went all over the world for many reasons, poverty, to make a better life, we had no choice, if you like. But everywhere the Irish went, and as an Irish person, if you didn't work, that was it. You didn't survive, you didn't last. You either came home if you could come home, or you died. That was it.
Now,
and in case of the immigrants here, we have many, and I'm not anti-immigration, but I'm anti some of the immigration that's coming into Ireland, because I have no problem with people coming to Ireland who want to come, add to the community, work like we do, like we've done, gone all over the world, work, be part of society. There's no issues. We have hundreds of thousands of people doing that, particularly across our medical system and indeed our education. No issue. But I do have and our latest, if you like, or our biggest influx have been the Ukrainian people who have fled from, effectively a major war. We had at one stage over 100,000 of those Ukrainians that have come. Prior to that, when we had the boom, the Celtic Tiger era, in, I suppose, the late 90s, early thousands, we had people from all over Eastern Europe in particular came to Ireland to work. They came and they worked and integrated and all of that. They were, I suppose, again, from Christian backgrounds. And when the boom or the tiger died here, they left, they went to other countries. Some of them stayed, have integrated. But we have a cohort of immigrants, if you like, that have been brought into the country. There's lots of talk around them. Some wrong, some right. They're not working. They're not allowed to work, possibly. And they're being housed at the detriment, or to the detriment of some of our own people. We have 15,000, we're told, homeless in Ireland. The majority of them supposed to be from Ireland. We've always had homeless. We'll have homeless. But, somewhere you have to draw the line and say, you need to look after your own first. And I get the fact that we're part of the EU, and I get the fact that we have to take a certain cohort. But I think we're more than doing our share. And we are a small island of 6 million people thereabouts now. But our percentage of, if you like, non-Irish, and as an ordinary person, I don't know a lot about all of this, but I do know, looking across Europe, some countries certainly are ruined the day that they allowed so many in, or that they accepted so many in, or they invited. You can call it what you like. So you have to have a system in place. When we went around the world as Irish people, we were just a dot in the ocean, if you like, a drop in the ocean of the local population or whatever. But we were of, I suppose, go back to the religion side of it, we were of a Christian, I suppose, ethos. So we had different views. I don't mind what religion you are. But I know myself, and I've gone around the world to various countries, and I've seen a bit now. But I know that when I'm in particular countries, I will respect their views and their laws, or I will be sent home, or I go home myself. But in Ireland, it seems that, and it's been portrayed by maybe the wrong type of people too, that we're seeing that the new Irish, if you like, their views are being imposed on the old. The people that are there, the people that are indigenous, if you like, and it's not sitting well with people. How you solve it, I don't know. It needs lots of discussion. We need everybody's view on the different sides of it, but we're not getting all the information. The ordinary person, people in general,
We're not
educated
allowed. We're not allowed to give the opposing view. I just want to pick up. I just want to pick up, and anyone can take up this. I want to pick up on what Tom has been saying there, in relation to. I really get annoyed when I hear various do-gooders saying, we emigrated and we were accepted into those countries and we should do the same here, and that's all fine and dandy. The difference is that we built those countries that we went to whether it was the UK or whether it was the United States. We went and we integrated. Is the problem here, and anyone could take this up, is the problem here the integration that certain cohort of people are not suitable for immigration into, when they have such diverging opinions and cultures? Is that that really what the problem is? Because I certainly don't have any issue with someone coming in, working, paying their taxes, as Tom doesn't, paying their taxes, making the life better for them, and integrating with the rest of us. But is that integration, is that the real problem here?
I don't think it's merely a question of paying taxes, Eugene. I think a person has to find a way of speaking the local language, of adopting Irishness, of being capable of speaking the language of the people. I'm not simply talking about the English language or Gaelic. Acquiring a capacity to communicate with the local people, to make the values of the country which hosts them their own. And clearly certain groups of people are going to have greater difficulty than others. The Irish who went to England had relatively little difficulty because the value system communicated. True, most British people are Protestant and most Irish people are Catholic, but there's a common overarching framework. And I think this is fundamental. Within a generation, the Irish people became Anglo-Irish, and vice versa. English people who came to Ireland became Hiberno-English. I think we're talking about people who are, essentially speaking, compatible, notwithstanding all the difficulties, the historical difficulties. But an English person who goes to Ireland will integrate pretty well, and Irish people have proven that they've integrated very well into the UK. We need only think of people of Irish origin who became prime ministers and important ministers. I think of James Callaghan, Dennis Healy. Dennis Healy's father or grandfather was a Fenian. Okay, but these people show a capacity to integrate. There's no point in ignoring certain facts. If you were to introduce a group of people from Papua New Guinea, I think you're going to have problems in Ireland. Okay, the Irish people need immigration, but only insofar as they can integrate and make a positive contribution and speak the language, and to a certain extent acquire the sensibilities. Otherwise, it's a recipe for disaster, as we see in other European countries. One need only look at France, Belgium, Scandinavia, the UK.
Now, Andy, just picking up on a point that Marco has made there, and also Tom made there. Marco maybe slightly incorrect that it was, and I know he doesn't mean to be incorrect when he says this, that Ireland had it easily, when they had to go to Britain. But
no, of course, of course, there is a measure. Of course, there was discrimination, and I know that. Let me just qualify let me just qualify that there's always going to be a measure of discrimination for a while. My two come from a family of immigrants. My grandparents, my father and grandfather were second generation English people. Then my grandparents and my father came to Ireland. There's always going to be a measure of antagonism that one has to take it into account.
Yeah,
but
no.
Yeah.
And the only reason I say that, is because when the Irish went to the UK back in the 60s and 70s, obviously they had to deal with all of the flack over the atrocities of the IRA at the time. Now, the governments there didn't kind of introduce, kind of, as Tom said, that we must protect minorities at all costs, even that you're not allowed to speak about them. We plowed that furrow and we got through it.
That's right.
What's your view on that, Andy, in relation to Irish integration into the UK, especially because of the issues that we had to face, our forefathers or our grandparents, whatever, had to face when they went to the UK because of the atrocities of the IRA?
Well, let's face facts here. When the Irish moved to the UK, and let's face it, I think it's still true to say there's more Irish in the UK than there is in Ireland. And when the Irish went to the US, they didn't go to conquer. They went there to become part of that society. That was the point of going. No Irish person went to the UK with the intention of attempting to change British society. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to become part of it, in the same way that I would say nearly all, if not all, English people who came to Ireland wanted to become part of the Irish society. I'm one of them. And I never had any desire to change the society I was moving to. My sole desire was to become part of it and become accepted in part of it. And I was. And I believe that's the way the Irish, when they went abroad, behaved. Now, unfortunately, the reason we could do that is because we do basically come from a similar society that's based on Christianity. Even though, as I say, you may not be a churchgoer, your society and your beliefs are still Christian based. However, the problem comes when a large number of immigrants from an entirely different society with entirely different views and values come in to the country, be it the UK or be it Ireland, not with the intention of integrating, not with the intention of becoming part of that society, but with the intention either of creating their own mini society, the little microcosm within the Irish society, or taking over and changing Irish society. That is the most damaging part of any immigration, when the immigrants want to change the values and the society of their host. And I'm afraid to say that's what's happening lately.
Well, can I just jump in there now? Because I have to probably maybe dispute some of that, Handy. I'm, if you like, living on the ground. I know about the immigration that's coming into this country. I can't honestly put my finger or think of an instance where, and people have views of somebody actually publicly and maybe privately, but not publicly, saying we have to change Ireland to the way we think.
The Quran says so. The Quran instructs Muslim people to change the society that they're in if it's not Muslim.
But that's fine. That might be the Quran, but I'm not. I'm talking about people speaking publicly. I've met immigrants. I've met the current wave of immigrants. Some of them are lovely people. Others don't want to engage for one reason or another. But fundamentally, I think part of the problem here is we've brought in people into this country, but we don't have a system in place to integrate them properly, to show them our values, and to give them the opportunity. And
of course you do. Of course you do. Of course you do. Of course you do. You have schools. You have the government. You have the media. That's the system.
But Andy, to be fair, we have people coming in here that they're beyond schools. They're over school age.
Yeah.
And for example, any mature Irish person over 18, 21 years of age that leaves Ireland today or leaves the UK and goes to some other country, predominantly they're going there to make a better life, to work, if you like, or if they're in the education, to go and get involved in the education. We do have enclaves of Irish people all over the world. I was only talking yesterday to friends of ours whose son is in Australia. There's such an Irish community there. And they all hang out with one another or whatever, but they're not, and I do agree, they're not trying to change Australian society, because predominantly Australia was built on the back and the sweat and tears of the Irish that were sent there in the ships that were, if in the time of the famine here or before and after, if you had a misdemeanor, if you like, you were put on one of those ships and you were brought out to Van Diemen's Land and places like that. But I suppose it has come, in a wave, particularly in the last 5-10 years. There's waves and waves of immigration for one reason or another, strife across the world. I mentioned the Ukrainians. They have come. Some of the 100,000 that came here have gone home. They've gone to other countries. Some have integrated. Some haven't as of yet. But I think our system isn't in place. I think we have this view in Ireland that we can bring them in. We can house them like sheep in various buildings, and it'll all be fine. It won't be fine, because humans, by their very nature, regardless of their background or their religion, I suppose they want to integrate. They want to get outside the space they're in, and maybe some of them want to change Ireland and fine, but the majority, I think, don't know. They need to be instructed, if you like, as to where they've landed, what this Ireland is about. But we're probably too accommodating of everybody else's view, except possibly our heritage, and we need more of that. For example, I'm a dairy and beef farmer. If I want to become a tillage farmer, I'll have to change my system and get ready for that. If I want to bring sheep onto my land, I had sheep before, I don't have sheep today, but if I want to introduce sheep onto my farm, I'll have to get ready for the sheep. I'll have to have, different processes in place. And that's why I say we're not ready. Our people aren't ready to accept the waves of immigrants that's coming into the country. We're not set up for it. Rightly or wrongly, we're not set up for it. That causes a problem.
Tom, you make a very important analogy, but the problem is you speak about sheep and cattle, but let us say we introduce another species onto the land which you're farming. Let's say we introduce wolves and tigers, and I think you'd find that your business would go broke pretty soon. Now, the problem is that not all waves of immigration are the same. There are people who have an agenda. And I've noticed recently in Ireland, very much as in mainland Europe and in the UK, these groups of people are taking over public space. And it's perfectly clear that I'm talking about people with a jihadist mentality. Recently in Dublin, there have been groups of Muslims, jihadi Muslims, because there are decent Muslims, and I'm fully aware of that, and I believe we need to give those people a chance. They've been organizing marches from important churches in Ireland to the GPO. They organize mass public prayer in public spaces in Ireland. Now, for what good reason does a religion have to organize mass prayer sessions in public spaces, as if there were a lack of mosques or churches or whatever? This is a clear statement. It's happening all over Europe. And there, I can send you plenty of material which attests to this. Ireland, unfortunately, is a late comer to the game, but it's playing catch up very quickly at its own peril. This is it.
I agree. And that's why I say we're not ready for it. We haven't, if you like, prepared for it. I do agree. And I wouldn't accept at all or the fact that that kind of organized marches, whatever, is acceptable. I don't agree that it's there. If you want to express your religion, whatever it is, we all have our space to go to. We all have, as you mentioned, our churches, our mosques, our synagogues, whatever. That's where prayer, if you like, you express your prayer, and you don't shove it down somebody's throat. We as a nation have never done that. It's been done to us, and somewhat there might be a bit of that starting. I do know what you say about across Europe. I look at the internet as well. I've seen that. I've traveled Europe a bit, and I see that. I've seen it happen with my own eyes. I'm not pleased about it, and I think we still have a chance in Ireland. We still have a chance
Certainly, certainly.
Tom, you say that Ireland's not ready. I'm sorry, Eugene. Just one sec.
Yeah.
You say that Ireland's not ready. Why should it be ready? Why should Ireland have to do this? Like, for example, in London at the moment, there are posters on the side of bus stops that say, "Inappropriate touching of a female is not acceptable. It may be against the sexual discrimination, whatever the law it is." Now, do you really need to do that? If people are coming to your country, they should have enough respect to not do things which are anti-societal in that country. I don't believe that Ireland or any other country should bend over backwards to accept people who do not understand Irish society and do not want to become part of it. There's no reason, in my mind, that, for example, there should be even one Irish homeless person sleeping in a cardboard box in Grafton Street before you house anyone else.
Can I just, Andy, I want to put this to you now, because looking at it from a UK point of view as well. There's no doubt, and Marco touches on it there in relation to the amount of takeover of public squares and public areas by, for example, and we're not getting into this one is not about. We're not getting into the thing about the Middle East. We'll do that on another podcast. But there's no doubt about it. There is definitely a correlation between the amount of Palestinian flags, the amount of what do you call it, protests in relation to it. I'm not saying Ireland was always in favour of the Palestinians. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there's a direct correlation between immigration and what we're seeing on the streets in Dublin and in other cities as well in relation to it. Is this what you saw in the UK, and is this how they go about trying to change the country?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. Especially when you have governments who seem to be afraid of upsetting these people. I've never thought there's any problem in upsetting someone. I don't care if I offend someone. It's up to them if they get offended by something I say or not. It's not my decision to be offended. But certainly the UK government, and I'm afraid to say the Irish government too, seem to have taken this line that it's wrong to criticise the people who are coming to Ireland or the UK from other societies. Islamophobia is the word that's been coined. It doesn't really exist, but that's a word that's been coined to slap down any criticism of those people who are perceived to be coming into the country and not wishing to integrate, and in fact, further than not wishing to integrate, actually sticking their two fingers up at the people already resident and established in that country. And the trouble with that is that stirs up even more resentment. There was a guy in the UK yesterday, Montgomery Tom, his name is, English guy, and there was one of these Palestinian marches, and he had a sandwich board, like a board on his chest with a piece of string around his neck, and it said Palestinian equals mental issues, right? This guy was arrested by 12 policemen. Now, that to me, that's his right is to express his opinion. Why is it okay for hundreds of people to walk down the streets of a capital city shouting "death to all Israelis" from the river to the sea and all that, even though most of them don't know which river or which sea? Why is it okay for them to do that? But one guy expresses his opinion totally silently with a sign upon his chest saying that, and he's arrested.
You raise a very important point. I wouldn't have introduced the subject of Palestinism, Eugene. You introduced it, so I think it's worthwhile pursuing it a little bit more, because what has happened is, via this phony narrative, what has happened is that it is in reality a sugar-coated version of jihadi Islam. What has been practiced upon European populations is that they have developed some kind of romantic idea of on the one hand, freedom fighters, and on the other hand, liberals. And unfortunately, we see a sleight of hand whereby all those forces which are antagonistic to nation states are gathering around this flag. And you'll notice that in all these protests against nation states, in Britain, the UK, France, you have the ever-present Palestinian flag, which is undermining the notion of nation states. Now, I wanted to refer to one of the fathers of the Irish nation state, who was, of course, Padraig Pearse. Okay, and he made a very powerful statement when speaking about what a nation is. He speaks of a family grown large, and I think this is a very insightful statement. People tend to take these things, the idea of a nation state, for granted. It took hundreds, if not thousands, of years to get to construct, but it can be dissipated and destroyed within the course of a few decades. And this is what's happening in many countries throughout Europe.
I think, lads, you know, you've talked about the UK there, Andy. This started probably in the UK back in the 80s, if you like, where my recollection as a kid going to school and that was when the coal miners had the strike and the coal mines were closed by the then Prime Minister Maggie Thatcher. A lot of those areas that were divided jobs and whatever, then there was a cohort of people introduced to those areas, if you like, and they effectively took them over. I still think, now I could be wrong on that, and please correct me if I'm wrong on that, and you guys have mentioned about Europe has been, you know, overrun, if you like. Maybe no one used the word overrun, but quite a lot of those immigrants. And we're getting because we're on the periphery, we're getting a wave of it. I'll go back to the point I made at the start. We're part of EU, if you like. We're part of the team. And I played team sport all my life. And if you were on the team, and I watched a fantastic game yesterday, and you guys probably are aware of the hurling, and if a guy makes a mistake or does something wrong, gets sent off or whatever, chastised, his teammates they might, in the dressing room, they might, when they get home to the training ground, give him a piece of their mind. But on the day, in the moment, they will back their brother or their sister to the last. And we're a part of that family in Europe, if you like, and we seem to be following suit. But I don't know why, but I still say we have time in Ireland, and it's up to the Irish themselves, if you like, to say, look, hold on here. I'm concerned myself about my kids. I'm concerned about my grandkids when they come. I'm concerned about Ireland in 10 or 15 or 20 years' time. I'm worried about it as what it'll be. It has always changed, but predominantly, and we're a new country. But like most of Europe, we all came from a Christian belief. Now, jihadism or the Muslim faith, and I know some Muslims. They're lovely people. I know they're extremists on both sides. Eugene, you mentioned Palestine, and I know there's been various protests in Ireland about the Palestinian situation. What is actually laughable about some of the people that I see protesting, if they were in Palestine themselves, they wouldn't leave it. You know, in that particular society. I'm not happy with what's going on in Gaza. I think it's horrendous.
No, but
I wasn't happy. If I could just finish on that point, I wasn't happy with what happened on the 7th of October. If you like, maybe started all of this. I don't know. There's an ongoing conflict. We should know that in Ireland, of the conflict we had in this country. It's not right. There's no side right in this. There's no side particularly right in any war.
Tom, I'd urge a little caution here, and I say this in a friendly way. That it's the analogy with what happened between Ireland and the north of Ireland and the IRA and the Union that is a disanalogy, because what you have here in the Middle
Well,
East.
I haven't made the comparison as being the same. I made the
No.
point that it's wrong on both sides.
No, that's it. Well, that's it.
And look, maybe we're not going to get into the Palestinian situation.
No, we're not. We're not. But what I would do is I'd urge
it's a different
caution here.
situation
I'd urge
completely. I
caution.
know that.
But Tom, can I say to you that just in relation to what you say there about Irish people saying they're worried about their kids, but with all sorts of laws by the government, with the media, the way they've one narrative only, those voices are not being heard. They're not being heard. And what you have is you have a situation where extremists, now I know Muslims as well, and there's some very nice, very lovely people in the Muslim community.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
But there is extremists who use these marches to change the country. That's what they're doing. They're changing the country. And you mentioned that there's people in those marches that if they were in Gaza, they'd never get out of it because, gays for Gaza and stuff like that. I mean, okay, so what you have here is you have people who are being brainwashed, who might not even have a clue what's going on in Gaza. They might not, as someone said earlier, they mightn't have a clue which is the river and which is the sea, which river we're talking about, which is the sea, right? But what you have is, because of the inability of certain cultures to integrate into Ireland, in this case, what you have is you're going to have ghettos, and those ghettos can be quite dangerous if they're being run by extremists who want to change the country, who want, as you mentioned earlier about playing the hurling. How long will it be before our culture is diminished if these people are allowed to get away with this? Because it's starting. Where is it going to finish? That's my point.
And there doesn't seem to be much inclination in government to admit that there's that possibility, Eugene, which I think I agree with you. It's a terrifying possibility. No one seems to want to do anything about it. And if the likes of you and I and Tom and Marco speak out publicly about it, we're racists. You can't say that. You mustn't say that. You mustn't say this. Despite the fact that in Ireland, our right to free speech is enshrined within the Constitution and there is no blasphemy law. But yet still people get warned for saying things like that.
Speaking of free speech, let's go there. And anyone could take this up. Is free speech being diminished in Ireland in various ways?
I believe it is. It's happening in the UK. You've only got to look at the case of Lucy Connolly, who was jailed for 31 months for posting a tweet, which, albeit was not a very nice thing to say, which she then withdrew 4 hours later, and I think maybe 200 people saw it and no one acted upon it. She gets thrown in jail for 31 months for expressing her opinion. And I'm afraid to say that sort of thing is also starting to happen in Ireland. And I think that's a perilous road to go down.
Yeah, I think, and we hear about, and I don't know enough about it, maybe even to speak on it, but this hate speech bill that's being introduced or was tried to be introduced in the last government, and it's the same parties are in this government. And, as an ordinary person, you look at that and you don't see there's 180 odd or whatever elected people in the door. And when that was going through the door or whatever, there was no huge, there's three main parties. But apart from one or two outside of that, or maybe internally, but because they're part of the party, no huge opposition to maybe fundamentally changing our rights to speak, if you like. I think if that, and I don't know how far on it is, Eugene, you'd know more about this, but if that ever came to pass in the way that some people said it was going to affect us, I think it would be horrendous. But that's maybe some people's opinion on it. We don't seem to have anybody now in the political sphere that's kind of, if you like, middle ground that can take both sides' views and all views and say, look, we need to be going this way. We seem to be, I don't know what we are at the moment, because we have centre-right parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and we have, if you like, Sinn Féin they're supposed to be a bit on the left.
They
I
don't know what they are.
I don't know where they are now, but we still have a chance, I think, to learn from the guys mentioned earlier what happened in France and the UK, if you like, to somewhat were our big brother for generations, and they've got it so wrong in the UK, if you like, and we still have a chance, I think, and I don't know how it's going to be solved. I suppose time will tell, but I do worry. I do worry for the future of Ireland.
But Tom, you know what's scary
I
about
don't
this?
mind change for the sake. I don't mind change. I know we have to evolve. We're not like we were perceived years ago, dancing at the crossroads, leprechauns, and all of that. That's all fine. But
I've nothing against leprechauns.
no, but we're smart enough.
They're an endangered
nowadays.
species.
They never harmed anyone.
No. Well, touch a fairy tree and you'd know. But, those were the old values, if like, or the old things that people were afraid of. We have it on our phones. We have instant information, right or wrong, from all over the world, and it's whoever is controlling the narrative or controlling the media, if you like, that feeds that information that people take up. And we mentioned already about people in marches
Right,
who don't know where the river is or where the sea is, and
but isn't that right? But isn't that a problem when there is such a narrow debate in Ireland? Isn't there the possibility that Ireland is being sleepwalked into a territory which it'll no longer identify with? This is because I see it happening all over Europe. The social landscape is changing, the cultural landscape is changing. Isn't it the danger that you're going to wake up one day and say, do I belong here? That you have somehow been disenfranchised, that people fought for Ireland, for its independence, for recuperating a culture which was suppressed, the Irish language, even to a certain extent, but acquiring that sense of nation. I mean, I subscribe very much to a Burkean view of the nation. Edmund Burke, the great Anglo-Irish philosopher, who speaks of something that is inherited, that we are the custodians of something that we need to transmit to future generations. What are you going to transmit to future generations? That's the problem. Or will they inherit a situation for which their parents, they'll curse their parents?
You see, I think absolutely 100% agree with you. The trouble is, in the UK now, you are seeing and hearing more and more ordinary citizens who are saying, I don't recognize my country anymore. That's sad. I don't think that's really started to pervade the Irish yet.
Right.
But in order for it not to, you've got to have strong leadership in government. You've got to have people like Giorgia Meloni of Italy and Viktor Orban of Hungary, and I can't remember his name, in Poland, who have their own country's culture and society at the absolute top of their agenda. I'm afraid to say, I don't think Ireland has anyone like that right now. It's badly what it needs.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Tom, just in relation to that hate bill, if what's kind of scary about that is if that government had another 2 years in power before the election, if it had another 2 years in power, I would imagine that bill would have gone through in its current form, right? It would have gone through.
And yet, Eugene, there was a lot of talk around it, and in the last election, the particular minister that was bringing it forward, it was certainly used in the campaign, if you like, against that minister, or it was talked about in the person's particular constituency, and that person got such an avalanche of support at the polls. You know, you'd nearly, people would ask themselves, question themselves, were we all wrong? Because the majority of people vote that person resoundingly back into government or back into the law.
This brings me to my second point, and this is an incident I had on radio recently. Now, just to give you the background, I was interviewing an MEP. Interviewing an MEP who said, sent out a press release saying, Gaza should not be forgotten because of the strikes on Iran. right? Now, I prepared my interview for him, and because of the closure of the Israeli embassy and all in Ireland, I sent him a text, and I said to him, "Do you mind if I ask you about challenge you on Ireland's attitude towards Israel and thing?" And he said, "Absolutely no problem." Okay, so I prepared the interview. Obviously challenged him on mildly challenged him. Not, I didn't go ahead for it. I challenged him on his press release, and then I got to the part about the Irish attitude. Now, first of all, to say his attitude would have been the same as the Irish government's attitude of what the Irish government have been saying about Israel and about blah 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 all the way along. Right now. Would anyone agree with me here that if you're a journalist and you're going in and asking, or an interviewer on a radio, and you're going in to ask a person who you know is going to give you the government's slant on this, their own view on it, right? Okay. Would the question I'd go in and ask him was, do you agree that isn't it terrible that genocide that's been caused in Gaza, right? Now, to me, if I asked that question would be there'd be bias there. In other words, I'd be going, I would be asking him.
It's a loaded question, yeah.
I knew a loaded question, which I knew he was going to answer. What I did was, I asked him. I was the what do you call it, the devil's advocate, because I had no one from Israel there to talk. So I asked them the questions from their point of view, which is, in my opinion, what a journalist should do, right? And the manager of the station came back sent me a text in the middle of it saying that my interview was not independent. It was not a thing. He said that I was given personal opinions, which I wasn't. I was giving I read what's in the Irish media, and I read what's in the Arab media, and I read what's in the Israeli media, and I ask the questions based on that, and I read both left and right. So I don't concentrate on one side or the other. But I asked him very straight questions. He had no problem with the interview, no problem answering the questions. But here's the rub. The fact that someone thought that I was being biased by asking questions and giving the MEP a different slant on what the Irish government's come, I'm then accused of not being independent. I mean, that
as a journalist, that's literally your job.
That's my job. But my point here is that we have been so conditioned now in Ireland with this singular narrative and I'm not just talking about forget about Palestine,
yes, of course,
singular narrative on issues that we are in danger. We are in danger of alternative voices being fully closed down, and you have one side. That's just giving you one experience. In a thing which I've experienced myself,
but it's indicative. It's indicative of a general atmosphere.
Sorry, Marco. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I was merely saying it's indicative. Basically, they want to maintain an echo chamber where no other views can be heard, or to suppress them. They're either suppressed or excluded, and that is not exactly an indicator of free speech.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom, is that you spoke about the Dáil earlier on, the makeup of the Dáil, that it's all kind of, there doesn't seem to be an opposition in it really. They're plucking at straws. Do you think that the makeup of the Dáil is partly to do with the singular narrative, that the makeup that the people have been elected is because of a singular narrative?
I actually don't think it was part of, if you like, the last election, and the makeup of the Dáil and the TDs, if you like, from various parts of the country. I know a lot of them, as you do, Eugene, and they're fine people, doesn't, you know, but it seems to be that they're all in this together, you know, and until somebody shouts up like the king has no clothes, you know, everybody seems to be in the same, you know, zone, if you like. So I don't know. That's why I go back to the point of it. I'm worried. My generation, your generation, Eugene, and our older, the people that are older within our generation seem to be the people, if you like, that are in control at the moment in the Dáil and whatever. And I'm hoping that the younger people, and they're a lot better educated than I certainly was, they have all the dash, if you like, at their, I hope they will see the wood from the trees because they're well traveled to see what's going on. They want, I'm sure, an Ireland of the future, like they've grown up in themselves, you know, a pretty safe place. And just I'll go back briefly to a point that Andy meant about or mentioned about a placard or on a bus shelter or something about you can't do it. Look at that happened in all societies. It certainly did in the past. We've had the scandals in the church, you know, we've all of that inappropriate touching crosses all. But I do take the point that I do know from my own kids that they certainly recognize that, if you like, the people that they didn't grow up with tend possibly to come from a culture that it seems to be fine. And that's where the Irish people need to say, no, this is not our culture. We're not having this. You're welcome to Ireland. We're a country of 100,000 welcome. You're welcome to Ireland. Come, work with us, play with us, and all of that. But, you know, we're not going to be, something that's not going to be shoved down our throat. And until the people themselves, the Irish, you know, realise that, we won't, unfortunately, have much change of the direction we're going in the very, very short term.
Those people need to be told.
Andy, just before you come in there, I just want to bring a couple of comments that are in there. Vitor says, quite an interesting topic, lads. He says, not only about the Irish government, Irish people, like many Eastern societies, tend to be permissive and easygoing. I lived in Poland, Hungary, and locals don't tolerate the conduct we see here. And Helen writes in and says, there appears to be a dangerous narrative happening in Ireland now, and it's the people who go against that narrative and voice on opinion that are shut down and abused, or culture cancelled, if you like, cancelled. So thanks to Helen and Vitor for those comments. Now, Andy, you were saying, sorry.
I was going to say that the trouble is with a lot of left-leaning politicians lately is there seems to be this idea that it's wrong or it's embarrassing to be proud of your country. That's wrong. That's inherently wrong. That's the wrong way it is, because unless you're proud of your country, you cannot defend it. So people that come to live in Ireland or come to live in the UK, or people that come to live in Spain, need to understand that they are there to respect that society, not to try and change it. And I think Ireland has a little bit of an advantage over the UK. I think the UK is badly damaged. I think Ireland has a small window of opportunity in which to prevent that damage happening.
Marco, have you anything to say on that?
No, I'm very much in line with what has been said. Tom, you speak about people who have a much better education nowadays. I'm not quite sure that's the case. I see people with a less of a capacity for critique, less skepticism. I think there's a lot of groupthink now. I think the universities are doing a lot of damage rather than educating people. I know it sounds a little provocative, but people tend to think very much in a groupthink mode. The academia tends to be inhabited by professors of a certain hue, and I think they are doing a disservice to the youth today.
Possibly, but I suppose maybe that's one of the downsides of education, if you like, that you're within that closed realm, if you like, and you're fed all that information. But if you like, how then has all our universities and colleges been, shall we say, how has all that narrative come from there? Because it's through education that you change things. And so that means then that we have to go back a bit and say, is it 10 or 15 years ago that our education system started to change with our new wave of professors that started to, enlighten our youth in a different way? Or, I suppose I always was of the view myself, even going to school, I mightn't have my homework done because I would be working or whatever, and we before the teacher the following morning, but there might be 4 or 5 that have the homework done in a particular classroom, maybe, and we'd all, if you like, copy. But I could never copy somebody else's answers. I'd have to have the answer, and I might look at 4 or 5 different versions of the answer, but I didn't form my own. And I have always been kind of like that myself. So maybe I in many respects, I'm not, qualified to give any view other than my own. But as you would know, I think as I see things, I say it. I'm not always right, but
no. I take your point.
And I think we possibly people need to think for themselves. And you made a good point, Andy, there, in saying that we still have an opportunity in Ireland, and I believe we do. Yeah. We will come to the table of integration, if you like, or immigration, maybe not so integration, maybe a bit later than others. But some have been forced on us through, as I said, the wars and whatever. We still have a chance. But I'm hoping that the old fogies like me, and I'm not probably that old, but I'm old.
No, you're not.
No,
you're not.
I'm old.
I can't accept that. I can't accept that.
The younger generation, shall we say, see the light.
Yeah. We've about just less than 5 minutes left. Just a quick question on the university. I don't know what the story is in Ireland, but do we, because the universities might be going down certain paths, do we need to look at the funding of universities, private funding of universities, to see where they're being funded from?
Well, I think it's pretty much public knowledge that a lot of funding has been received from actors who are not exactly in sympathy with the values of certain countries. I think we have recently the example of Qatar financing European and United States universities. I think that certainly should be questioned.
Yeah. Andy?
That it's not something I've ever thought of, but it's a really good point. And if that's true, Marco, I didn't know that, but if that's true, that really should be looked into. Universities are supposed to be places where people's personalities are allowed to develop, not pushed down one line. And if there is funding coming from some particular, shall we say, interested party, and that has an effect on what these people are being taught, that really badly does need to be looked into.
Indeed, yeah.
I'd agree with that, because I think, and I made the point earlier, he who pays the piper generally calls the tune.
Shouldn't be calling that tune in the universities, though.
Yeah, and possibly some are, there's no doubt. And I've no doubt there's some are, and it's possibly always, it's probably always been the way, but probably maybe more so in, if you like, in a dangerous way nowadays. In the sense that our culture is being probably manifestly changed by the way our education is being delivered, and to our kids, if you like.
Can I?
It has been.
What better place to indoctrinate people with propaganda than a school?
Absolutely.
Can I throw just one last question? There's a very quick question around to everyone there. Just a small answer from each person. What is the one thing that we can do right now, to make some change in ensuring that Ireland maintains its culture, but also welcomes those who wish to integrate into our society? What should we do now? Let's start with you, Tom.
What should we do now? I think we should educate our people a bit better. And unfortunately, the difficulty there is that the mainstream media, if you like, are on one trajectory. And maybe the voices of reason, in a sense, are not being heard. Because you have the empty vessels make the most noise, if you like, and you have all the other actors, if you like, on the fringes getting their hearing. So I think the media, if there was a bit more, and that's why the hate speech bill can concern me. We have free speech enshrined in our constitution, and we need that. We need that to continue.
Andy?
I'm afraid to say that my answer is probably one that's very difficult to do, and that's to get a government or someone at the head of a government, a very strong politician, to be a Giorgia Meloni or a Viktor Orban. I don't think that's going to happen, I'm afraid, but that's what it needs.
Marco?
I would I agree with Andy. I think you need somebody with a sense of vision, and a sense of vision is rooted with a sense of awareness of self and of identity. That is what has gone amiss in Ireland, and I think that is what has led to disorientation and a weakening of the immune system in Ireland. And we see all these aggressive elements insinuating themselves into Ireland and gnawing away at the social fabric of the country. And I think we still haven't reached rock bottom. I hope that can change. I hope Ireland, I see there are rumblings of discontent, but it's still not enough. People need to be proactive. They can't just let it happen and to be sleepwalked into oblivion.
And finally, I'll say, I think that Ireland is ripe for a conservative party in Ireland. And I don't mean a far right party. I mean a conservative party in Ireland, because as Tom alluded to earlier on, there is it's the one voice in the Oireachtas, in one voice and one voice only. And I think that Ireland is ripe, except it just hasn't found a charismatic leader to lead that thing. But I think it would make huge difference in Ireland. Bring balance to the conversation.
Yes.
We're going to leave it there. I want to thank Andy Linton in Spain. I want to thank Marco, my co-host in Jerusalem, and I want to thank Tom Turley in Galway for joining me on this inaugural podcast of the Green Zone. And I think it was an interesting conversation we were having there. I thought it was engaging, and let's do this again, because really you've been so engaged in this, and I just want to thank each and every one of you for that, and to thank our listeners and people who wrote into us as well, and for them for doing that. And I'm going to leave it and just say thank you very much, and we'll end this, and we'll be back again soon. Thank you indeed, and good night to you all.
You too, Eugene.
Good night.
Good night.